We begin tonight with last night's news from Las Vegas, where at least 59 are dead and more than 500 are injured in what's now considered the deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history. I'm Josh Carney.
And I'm Mike Riccardi. The death toll has risen overnight as hundreds have made their way to the hospital after last night's deadly mass shooting on the Las Vegas Strip. Here's what we know so far. Police responded to reports of a shooting at the Route 91 Country Music Festival just after 10 p.m. last night. A hail of bullets came down over the crowd when a 64-year-old gunman opened fire from the neighboring Mandalay Bay Hotel. The room he fired from overlooked the concert. The identified shooter is now dead. He checked into the hotel last Thursday, and police found 19 rifles in his room on the 32nd floor.
Las Vegas Sheriff Joseph Lombardo is reluctant to call it an act of terrorism as investigators continue to try and understand the shooter's motive. President Trump called the shooting an act of pure evil and is scheduled to visit Las Vegas on Wednesday. Meanwhile, hundreds have headed to blood banks throughout Las Vegas today as lines wrapped around the block to give to victims. Condolences have stretched across the globe and even amongst survivors of former mass shootings, as survivors of the Pulse nightclub shooting of the last year expressed their condolences in a press conference earlier today. The investigation is still ongoing as authorities have made contact with the shooter's ex-wife in an attempt to learn more about the reasons for this tragedy and continue to explore all aspects of this tragedy.
So clearly, we don't know the motive yet of why this shooter did what he did. But I mean, honestly, I'm at a loss for words. I don't know where to go from here because if you look at both sides of the argument, Democrats saying we need gun control, I don't see how you can possibly ban these weapons and have it hold up in the current Supreme Court. Then on the other side, you have people say, well, you know what? The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. We hear that a lot. I'm sorry, but I don't see a good guy with a gun shooting into a 32nd floor window and somehow stopping this man.
And one of the confusing components for people who were there was not only did they not know what it was, where it was coming from, but they weren't sure why authorities weren't firing back. Now, with it being an open-air venue, it had a lot of existential threats that weren't common among a lot of these situations. It wasn't inside a building, it was over it. And it was thus way more vulnerable, and thus the toll of bodies is way higher. But I think it's genuinely unprecedented how there is no paper trail, there is no sort of lead, there is no mental illness, there is no political affiliation that we know of yet. But this shows you that it really can come from everywhere, and when you see this happen, it is kind of shocking.
And we do have officials saying that we can't call this an act of terrorism because they are hesitant to say that because they don't know what exactly his motive was. And unfortunately, I think in a lot of instances, had this shooter been somebody that is non-white, you would have seen a lot of people jumping to the gun and calling it an act of terrorism. So we do have to wait till the motive comes out. We don't know anything, like you said, about this man's state of mental health. That could always be a factor. We can't speculate as to whether or not that played a role. But I mean, going forward from here, I don't know what exactly, how we change things. It seems like this is just bound to happen every couple of months.
Well, that is a terrible statement to be of fact, but on top of that, the worry is compounded by the fact that there is a lack of answers and that there is a lack of motive and that there is a lack of being able to kind of sort this out for what it was. And there really doesn't seem like there is a definitive trail, and that's what authorities are worrying about at this time.
I mean, well, we're going to have to leave it there. We're going to continue to monitor this situation. This is something that's not going to be going away.